Velkomin í Rauðan raunveruleika. Í dag ætlum við að tala við Mímir Kristjánsson sem þingmaður Stortingsins í Noregi fyrir flokkin Rødt og við ætlum að tala við hann á ensku af því hann á erfitt með íslenskuna. Hann var fæddur og uppalinn í Noregi en hann á íslenskan faðir. Sæll Mímir.
Sæll.
Thank you for coming very much.
Yeah, very nice to be invited.
So Rødt, it's a party, maybe a fraternity party of us here in the Socialist Party. Is it an old party?
It matters in what way, but the party was founded in 2007, but it was based on several smaller different groups which go back into the 70s. So but it was all these groups had tried to have a breakthrough for, 35 years and no success. And then at some point they managed to merge, and then the beginning of the Red Party or Rødt started. Mm-hmm. So it's not an old party in itself, but it has roots from the 70s movement.
Socialists and leftists and labor unionists coming together.
Yeah, different types, and this old Maoist party in Norway, which is called AKP, Labour Communist Party of Norway, so these parties they merged together, and then a new generation of people came in. This was also what happened with the merger, that a few years afterwards a lot of the old people that have been arguing about a lot of different stuff for a lot of time, they took a step back or stopped arguing about all these things, and a new generation of people came in, and the party could start building from more or less from scratch.
People felt that it was time to unite, to put focus together, the energy.
Yeah, and to make, I think also that there was a feeling that you wanted to make a real contribution to the class struggle, and there had been so many years of all these losses. We had this whole neoliberal period and everything that sort of didn't work out, and there was a very big need, and then came the financial crisis and everything, so there was a very big need for a radical sort of force. So it took some time. But in 2017, Rødt came into Storting with one person. So it's a bit different in Iceland. You can come in with only one or two if you don't have to have 5% to be in. Mm-hmm. And then at the last election, we crossed this border, which in Norway it's 4%. So we have 4.8%, and then we have 8 people in Stortinget. And which means we are a small party, but not a mini party. So we have 4 parties who are smaller than us, and maybe 5 parties who are bigger than us. So yeah.
So you're like sitting in the middle.
Basically. Yeah.
And what have been like some chief issues of Rødt that it has focused on?
What sort of became very quickly the sort of main idea was to sort of put everything into this. Combating social inequality and economic inequality. So we call it Forskjells-Norge, the Norway of inequalities. And the idea was to try to put every single political area to sort of think about it in this way. So if you're talking about climate issues, it would be important that all the climate policies of the Red Party had to be socially just. You couldn't support taxes that were maybe good for the climate but bad for people with low incomes. You had to find other ways to do it. So we're working always with this, and always sort of very, very trying to be very harsh with ourselves in making this priority to always talk about the growing differences between the rich and the poor, how the working class was losing and the owners were winning, and this is sort of the main focus in everything we've been working with, I think, since 2011, once sort of this strategy was made, and this is paid off in the end. And it's probably like this in every left party in the world, but I was in something called Red Youth in 2005-06, and it was like if you were like trying to vote for the 5 most important issues, you would end up with 10. because nobody managed to make a decision. Everything was important, and what about this, and what about that, and what about that? And then you finally manage to break this sort of circle and say, this is our main priority. We are here to do the class struggle. And it's not like we don't have other political opinions, but this is always the first priority in all our messaging and everything.
Mm-hmm. For advancing the cause of the working class, to improve its lot and its power towards the owning class and more in generally through democracy.
Yeah, and this is also, we've had some numbers on this from the election in 2021 when we had the breakthrough. And what was really nice to see was that the Red Party suddenly, it's been the typical old Red Party voter was a student or an academic person living in the center of a big city. But the new voters coming in the 2021 election were people on social welfare, a lot of single parents, a lot of people with low-paid jobs. So not like maybe the classical industrial worker. I think they still vote for the old Labour Party. Some of them vote for, and we have some union support and stuff like that. But maybe these more lower paid parts of the working class, people in the working class who have the most problems paying their bills, I think, have started to vote for the Red Party.
And has there probably like here, I'm not very informed with the situation in Norway, so it's good you are here. Have there, economic conditions been worsening these last decades? Yeah,
or not the last decades. In Norway, because Norway has the oil industry, so Norway inequality has been growing since 1989, and there has been some small growing poverty. And there has been right-wing politics, some privatization, but because of the oil money, Norway has been so rich, so a lot of the problems like austerity and stuff like that hasn't been that big an issue in Norway. But now these last few years, with the rise of prices on everything, especially in Norway on electricity and power, has made a much bigger problem for a lot of people. So now these last 2 years maybe, has been a big, more like a growing social crisis. So yes, we had the same in Norway as in every other country with right-wing politics since the end of the 80s, but the oil money has sort of softened it for a lot of people for a long time.
Interesting.
Is the oil industry in Norway, is it fully nationalized or is it...
It was fully nationalized, and it's partly privatized, but it's still very national. So the biggest company on doing oil in Norway, by far the biggest, which I think is the biggest company of any kind in all of Scandinavia, is it's owned, I think, 80% by the state, and at the same time the state has to own directly a part of every oil field, whatever company does it, and on top of that they have to pay 83% taxes on the oil. So there's a lot of money into this system, and still they get filthy rich, the private people working in it. So it's still very, very profitable. It's not very difficult to find an American company wanting to do oil business in Norway. So it says a lot about the way oil has
And it's interesting. People try to say that nationalization of big industries doesn't work, because the public sector cannot run it efficiently and something, just like ideological axioms that they maintain. But Norway is a shining example of this can definitely work out.
Yes, and it's not like everything is perfect in a publicly owned company, and a lot of the public owned companies in Norway, they are almost run like private companies, the way it is today, but there is at least no reason to say that they're not efficient or that they don't make money. And I think, if I'm right, I think the 4 largest companies on the Norwegian Stock Exchange have the state as the majority owner. So it's the biggest bank and the biggest sort of aluminium smelter and the biggest oil company, and also this, they make fertilizer, but it's very big.
Is your bank like totally owned by the
No,
state? Or?
and it's people don't. It's the worst bank for the customers, so it's nothing to be proud of. But it's owned by the state, and it makes a lot of money at least. So yeah, so this is maybe the Norwegian problem, is that you can have this state ownership in name, but and they also, when they get this, if they only get in 2% private ownership, like on the stock exchange, then you have to follow all the stock exchange rules, and suddenly the state loses a lot of control and influence.
So it's just like any other capitalist bank trying to make money as in any ways possible.
But of course, the difference is that the profit goes to the state in the
That's
end.
a big difference.
That's a big difference. But still, our policy would be to take these. We have proposed, because Norway has a big sovereign wealth fund, the oil fund, which is, I think, what I can't even say that number, and it's 16,000 billion Norwegian kroners. So it's impossible to say in Icelandic because there's so many zeros. But to use some of that money to buy back these 4 or 5 big companies that have been partly privatized, and take them into total public control. So you can use them for something, like you can use them for industrial development or for social banking or something like that. Instead of having this, you own a company but you can't run it, which is sort of the problem. But Norwegian history is a shining example that, because the state did run these companies before, and they went very well before as well. So I think this is not about ideology. I think a company is able to go. What is about ideology is who gets the profit, who all these things, and what is the point of a company, and what are the goals. But if a company goes bankrupt or not, that's not the question of ideology. There are stupid private people, they go bankrupt all the time, and there are smart private people who get very rich. And there are well-run state companies, and there are badly run state companies. And there are no reasons to think like the right thinks, that if you just put some private guy, and then one of the biggest industries in Norway was the timber industry. And then in the year 2000, it was private. The biggest company, they wanted to put all their money into buying newspaper to make paper for newspapers. So in the year 2000, they didn't understand that the internet would change the future of newspapers. So the company is now bankrupt. And if this was a state-run company, we would hear about it for 200 years. But it's just a private company doing something stupid, and then it's forgotten the next day.
Something that's not going to work out in the economy.
It's like a double, what's it called, like there's a twofold meaning. Like
double meaning.
There's like a double meaning to it. There's like if it is a state-run company that fails, it's because it was a state-run company. But if it's a private company that fails, it's because of the person who did it. It's like individualistic. It's so stupid.
Can you tell us something about the social class situation in Norway? Have the labor unions been very active, or did they, similar to here, did they become like bureaucratized and kind of away from the grassroots? Yeah,
I think that Norway together with Sweden and Denmark have very strong labor unions, and Norway has traditionally has more political unions than Sweden and Denmark. It's because in Sweden and Denmark, to have insurance, if you lose your work, you have to be a union member. In Norway, you get that from the state. So we have less union members but we don't have people who are members of unions if they don't want to, just to get insurance, which is a good thing. So I think we are better off than many other countries. But yes, for sure, it's this top bureaucracy at the top of the labor unions. They have really high salaries. They have this. They give a lot of money to especially the Labour Party, but also to a few other social democratic smaller parties. Some of them give a bit money to Rødt as well, every election, for like election campaigning. And they have been supporting some neoliberal cuts as well in the past. But I think they are being more radicalized now. But you haven't had, because in Iceland you had this big conflict inside of the labor union, and you haven't had this you have a left wing in the labor union and a right wing, but you haven't had this big giant conflict like you had in Iceland that way. So it's sort of it's sticking together, but it is becoming more radicalized.
The confrontation is taking shape. Like our confrontation has started. Things are changing. Hopefully, people are getting more involved, especially with Efling. They've managed to like democratize and really activate the grassroots. So it's coming to a head.
And in Norway also, I would say that the Labour Party, which is now very small compared to historically, it is only like 20% in the polls. You could go only, I don't know, 15 years back, they had 35%. And if you go back to the 50s, they had 50%, sort of. And they are still, of course, the dominant party by far in all the labor unions. And to be a leader in a labor union, you almost have to have a membership card in the Labour Party in Norway. But the second most important party in the labor unions, I would say, is the Red Party. Because even though there are other parties not bigger than us on the left, like the Socialist Left Party, they haven't been as concerned working with this. They haven't had this working class focus as much as we had. So we are sort of the biggest challenger inside. And in the private workers' union, especially the industries, then the radical wing last year won a very big victory on the Congress, saying no to a lot of the more neoliberal and pro-European electricity politics, which has been very important for the government led by the Labour Party. And their prime minister was there, and he was like making a very passionate speech. And normally it's like that when the leader from the Labour Party comes to a union and holds the speech, then everyone applauds afterwards and it's finished. But this time it just didn't work. People were just angry and furious, and then they lost sort of the discussion about that. So there is a lot of change in these things. Because
that what happened in Norway, right, is that the energy prices just went very, very high when the Ukraine war invasion of Russia started in Ukraine.
Yes.
The prices went up because you have like this integrated market that follows market prices, right? So it's like a public-private thing.
Yeah, everything started in the beginning of the 90s with all these deregulation policies. Before that, we just had... we didn't have a market for electricity. It was just like highly regulated, nothing. And then it was sort of a market. And then they started building. We've always had like cables to send the power to Sweden and to Denmark and even to Russia. Now it doesn't work anymore, but okay. But then they started to build these export cables, we call them, to the Netherlands and to Germany and to the UK, and not for like having safeties if you're empty for electricity, but for selling electricity, and they have higher prices than us. But because of the European Union, you don't only export energy, you import their prices. So in my part of the country, which is this southwest part of the country, the electricity prices have been much higher than in the rest of the country, even though we have the biggest surplus of electricity. But it's because we are the closest to the European Union. So it's and people don't understand it. It's like if it's 1 krona to make the electricity, it costs you 100 krona to buy it, which is like it doesn't really make sense. And all these companies are still owned by either the state or the local municipality, so it's just profit into the sort of public, but people get poor and the state gets rich, which is just
So it's like even though they are state enterprises or from the municipalities, they have to follow the market prices.
They're like, we call it or lekebutikk. It's like when kids they play like they have a store. It's like it's really everything is owned and controlled by the state, but we have to play that we're doing this by like free market rules, and it's not. Nothing is a free market about it. Actually, everything is really still highly controlled by the state, but it's like this ideology thing.
We had a situation here in Reykjavík where ljósleiðarinn, which is the city's internet grid and infrastructure, and it is trying to compete with Milan, which is was once Síminn, which was the public communication infrastructure. It was privatized and then split into many different parts, and Mila became a thing out of that, and it was bought by some French capitalists. And so ljósleiðarinn in Reykjavík, which was supposed to just originally service Reykjavík, was unable to compete with Milan. And so they have the city said they need to get in some investors, privatize like 33% of it, to try to make ljósleiðarinn like competitive. But so we here in the Socialist Party were thinking like, this is supposed to be a non-profit like public infrastructure, but because of some European regulations we have to follow because of our membership in EFTA, we cannot do that. We cannot stop market competition, you know.
And this is exactly the same, and it's very strange because most people would agree that water or roads are public infrastructure. And why isn't electricity or like fiber cables? There's no really good explanation for it. So and I think this is exactly sort of the why are these at all commodities to be sold at a market? It's like the market is, I don't know, the market is maybe good for like selling toys or doing something else which is not very important, and then you can have 1,000 to choose between, and if somebody doesn't like the toy they can go bankrupt, and there's not a big problem actually. But you can't sort of put people's lives in the hands, or like being able to eat or being able to and this is also a crazy thing about electricity. It's not like you choose between different types. It's not like I have a preference for this type of electricity. It's really, it's just the same electricity in your wall. It's not like, so it's, but they make all these like fake markets because they want to put everything into this. And this is also what they're trying to do in the welfare, which has also been a big issue in Norway. They're trying to, the state pays, but private people run it. So it's like, and this, it's so crazy. We don't do this not for schools and not for hospitals, but not anymore almost for care for the elderly, but it's a lot of it in kindergartens. So you have like big companies running kindergartens, and they're paid just out of the taxpayer, and they take profit, and they do kindergartens. And it's so crazy. And these people, some of the richest people in Norway, they've been rich by sort of exploiting the system. And two of them recently moved to Switzerland because they don't want to pay taxes in Norway anymore. And they're claiming to be job creators. And it's like every single krona you made is a tax krona. There's nothing else to it. You haven't done anything genius or smart, or it's just totally exploitation of the public. Scamming
the public funds. We call it in Icelandic being að vera á ríkisspenanum.
One thing that you mentioned, like with just infrastructure in general and where the market applies. It's always been my philosophy that the market applies, or maybe should apply or could apply to exactly like commodities that are not necessary for the basic survival, I guess. So everything that falls under like what's it called, like Maslow's pyramid of needs, like water, housing, healthcare, and like sustenance and stuff like that. That should all be like infrastructure that is definitely both sponsored and run by the state rather than private individuals, and then we can start thinking about like the market, about like privatization and like the private sector. But as soon as like or as long as the base needs of every single person in a certain population aren't being met, like the market has nothing, like will not make things better in a sense.
To take this electricity example again, it's this. They say we need the market because if we don't have the market, people won't have an incentive to save power. they won't sort of switch off the light. So because if the prices are high, people will switch off the light, and then the prices will go down, and so on. And there's two problems to that. There's only one reason people use electricity in Norway, and it's because of the weather. It's not really controlled by the market. It's controlled by the outside temperature. And the other thing is that rich people are just going to continue using as much electricity as they want. So there is no idea about scarcity in the top end. And now we have this big, I'm sure you have it as well, this inflation problem. With rising prices, and we have the central bank is putting up the interest rates and stuff like that, and it's really hard for people. At the same time, the luxury markets in Norway, they have never been better. They have never sold more expensive cars, more expensive houses. There has never been more private jets flying to Norway. All these things. And it's because they don't care. They have enough money anyway, so they don't care. And they don't have loans, so it's not a big problem. They even possibly have money in the bank. Yeah. So it's a really bad way of doing this. And another way, I don't know if that's even necessary to do, but if you want to take down the spending, why can't you just say, okay, now it's illegal to fly private jets, or now it's illegal to build houses that are bigger than this and this many rooms. Yeah. Or something like that, so you can use the resources in society. And this is our policy also for electricity, that you have a fixed price or a maximum price up to a certain amount, like a quota, and then over that quota, you get a high price, sort of, or you can have a market price or whatever. But so everybody gets that in the bottom, and you have like a two-price system.
Yeah.
Really grotesque seeing these disparities so strongly in these hard times. I think we have a similar situation here, but I haven't seen the data. But you see luxury cars being sold in quite significant amounts. And I might add, I think Jon Stewart, who I suspect is a social democrat, he on his show on Apple TV, he took together, he made the example of taking some European countries that have public healthcare options, and he took so many countries that the population was 350 million, similar to America, the United States, I mean. And he was comparing these European countries, Spain and Italy and some others, what they spent on healthcare for 350 million people is $1.5 trillion. While the United States, with its private healthcare system, with some public insurance for people, they're spending $3.5 trillion. So it's $2 trillion that they're paying extra for this private, and that's the state that's paying $2 trillion extra dollars.
Yeah, and this is really also typical sort of ideological myth of the right, is that they say, because a lot of people, there will be more older people in the future, so we can't afford to have as good pensions. But, we're going to be richer in the future as well. Everyone says that because they plan on growth and growth and growth. So there's not going to be spent less money on old people in the future. There's going to be spent more. But what's going to happen is they're going to spend them privately instead of having a public system. So people who can afford it, they will have a private insurance. This is booming now in Norway. Private insurances, even unemployment insurances. They tried to sell me in the bank the other day, but I said it's difficult to be unemployed when you're a politician. So, but still, it's crazy because it's like we've been so proud on having a welfare state, which is there for everyone if you lose your job or you get sick or something like that. And now there's this growing market, really fast growing market, because people don't trust these welfare options anymore. And all this money going into this market could go into the public system, and then people maybe would trust these benefits. But instead, it's just a much more. I don't think it's much more expensive because it's much worse organized, and there's a lot of profit and scamming and things like that. And then, of course, it's very unfair because some people won't afford it, and they're just going to be without the help.
And some people here in Iceland are saying we have a very strong, the nation has a strong social democratic ethic of we want strong healthcare. Everybody should be able to get healthcare. But some say if somebody has a private office, a doctor has a private office, that's all right. It's all right, isn't it? But it is problematic because you start to create this two-tiered system.
Yeah.
where some doctors are being pulled out of the public healthcare and being moved to the private healthcare, and the rich people being able to go there instead of using the public healthcare. Yeah. So it has a detrimental effect on the whole system.
Yeah, and the resources, at least in the health sector, they're not limitless. There are queues and waiting and stuff, and you don't have time for everyone and room for everyone. So for every doctor or every nurse you take out of a public hospital and into a private clinic for a rich person to, if they're what is it called, hypochonder, if they feel sick every day, for every person you take out, it's going to be longer to wait for the people staying back. So it shouldn't actually be legal at all to have these private, and the state educates all these people, all these doctors, all these nurses, uses so much money to do it, and then in the end it's just, okay, you're finished, and then you go work for the private, and then and
that's what, and I think maybe this is part of the reason we see like with plastbarkamálið, I don't know how to say it in Icelandic, like doctors who are scamming people, doing horrible things. Like it is a bad thing when you incentivize people to go into healthcare for profit, and you get these people who are just there to make money.
Yeah, exactly.
It changes the dynamic quite a lot.
It's almost like healthcare is a field where the passion for practice of actual medicine should take the priority, and not like profiting off the sickness of others. That also just creates a whole another bag of troubles. Like if we go into the root of actually like studying what's it called, like lyfjafyrirtæki, like pharmaceutical companies. Like the effect they have had on like the healthcare system, for example, in the US. Like as soon as we apply this for-profit motivation into a field that should be driven purely by the ethics of medical sciences, it kind of opens up a whole nother world of like what's it called, like clandestine and shady behavior,
corruption.
Corruption. Exactly. Just in general. So I think
but maybe it would be different if you could maybe have these private doctors' offices, but they weren't allowed to pay out profits.
Yeah, and this has been the Red Party's line in Norway. It's okay with private institutions like private kindergartens if they are not profit, and you have a lot of them as well, which are parents going together to make a kindergarten, or like this we have this on like Kvennafélag or things like that, and they have the old hospital is maybe 100 years old or whatever, and this is okay, but the profit is the problem. Immediately you have the profit. So and this is the right always tries to confuse this, so they use this word private because they don't want to talk about what is private for ideal reasons and private for profit reasons. But it's impossible to, they're just always trying to confuse the debate about it. I think there are also two other issues we should just mention briefly. One thing is the growing poverty in Norway, which has been at least 2 years, and these queues of people who need free food, which I think has been a really hammer blow for like the Norwegian, the Norwegian
morale.
Or the idea that Norway is like an exceptional country. It's we used to say we're the richest country in the world, and when Norwegians go abroad, we always talk about we have this fantastic welfare state and everything. And then suddenly, in the last 2 years, you have these growing queues with people in the cities who they can't afford food. And some of them are refugees, but some of them are old people from Norway. Some of them are single parents. Some of them are even in work. And it's a lot, and this has been a really big issue. Why is that? And why aren't they going to the welfare state to get help? And very often the reason is that they've been to try to get help with the welfare state, but the money they get from there is not enough. So they have to get these food bags in addition, or that it's so difficult to get help. There are so many forms to fill out and so many controls and checks. So they either don't want to do that, they think it's scary, or they don't make it. They can't do it right. So this has been a really big issue for us as well. And then the last thing, which is very part of this electricity thing, which is, I think, important to be aware of in Iceland, is this debate about nature and climate and this green capitalism thing. In Norway now, every single capitalist is a greenwasher. There's not even the oil industry is trying to green up. It's ridiculous. Every capitalist in Norway starts his presentation. It's a PowerPoint, and you have these UN, development goals. This is always the beginning, and that's why I should be allowed to build this giant factory somewhere, which is really just ridiculous, because they don't understand this idea of degrowth, that you can't just build more and more of anything. So, but the Norwegian capital and the big parties' policies, both the Labour Party and the Right Party, have been to just, and this is literally the name of the government strategy, more of everything faster, which is really ridiculous. But it's more power, more this, more that, everything. And the Red Party has been the center of fighting against these wind power installations, which are owned by through tax havens by foreign investors and stuff like that, and which ruin nature. But at the same time, Norway isn't short of energy. It's just for selling out of the country. So they make more energy to sell more out of the country. But they're always making this impression, we need more. We just need more and more and more of everything.
Very similar here. Yeah. Well, we have a lot of energy, and so much of it is going into like Bitcoin mining and so on. And then, of course, the aluminum smelters. And then, if these weren't like the wind farms here coming in here, same story here is that these are like the foreign capitalists trying to bring it in. We should create this public. We should have this infrastructure in the public domain. Clearly,
I agree. And then also, so I think this is because this has been like a discussion in that the sort of climate cause, which is extremely important, has been more and more diverted into this. Technological fashion, we just need to build this really. It's like the Elon Musk version of fighting climate change. This is more and more of this, and then you have this sort of we need to get rid of nature to save the world, which is sort of
quite insane.
Yeah, very insane, and I think you should be very careful about it, because I think Iceland is in a very similar situation with all these things.
And some of these big oil companies, they've been like, because at the COP conferences, they've been saying like we have a certain amount of quota of oil and fossil fuels we can burn, and then they're like creating projections into the future and saying in the next couple of decades we'll build so and so many carbon capture facilities, and so they increase the quota on the basis of some future building of some carbon capture things that they are projecting will be much more efficient at capturing carbon than they currently are. So it's just total greenwashing, a cop-out.
Speculating on factors that are not actually real as they are. It's
But good that every time you speak about this, climate action and how we should resolve these issues, you have to speak about social justice with it always, because otherwise it won't work out. If you put on, you will create such social chaos. If you put the pressures on the middle and lower classes, they won't accept any changes.
And this has also been very central for our strategy in that question, and this is why we're always looking for this. It's like more symbolic, but it's like banning private jets or whatever. But it's when you go through the numbers, most people, they don't fly almost at all. even in a country like Norway, it's like I think it's 85% fly one time a year or less or whatever. Yeah. And the rest, the 15%, they fly all the time. And I fly a lot, so I'm one of the bad guys in that. But so it's really this, and then you have this idea. Okay, let's just hike the prices. Yeah, if you do that, the only thing that's going to happen, if you don't have a quota system or an idea that it's like progressive, then those people who fly once a year, they won't be able to afford that single plane trip. While those people who fly the most, they will just keep on flying.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt them.
So it's like trying to find always these social ways of doing it, I think.
And like I think the World Economic Forum and World Bank and so on, they all assume that we're going to have 3% economic growth every year, and people should realize that means 3% every year means a doubling every 24 years, and double on that after that, and double and double.
In 100 years, it'd be a 300%. It's like the old question of exponential growth and capitalism. Just there's no system. There's like in a world of finite resources, expecting what comes of those resources to be exponential and infinite is naive at best, horribly just like dishonest at worst.
Well, there is a way to improve people's life, especially for the poorer nations of the world. You don't need like extreme economic growth to improve people's lives materially. You can adjust the economy to make it function way better for way more people.
Yeah, and the question is, I told you about these food queues in Norway. So you have like, I think it's 100,000 people in Norway during the last 6 months who had to go to get free food from like Rauða or something. And the question is there a lack of food in Norway? No, there's obviously not. So in all these discussions, is there a lack of food? There's not even a lack of food in the world. It's just a lack of a political system that is fair for the big majority of people, instead of letting some people get away with all the profit and other people be left to starve.
Some economists, now ecologists who and climate activists have said, to stabilize the earth, to ecologically be able to survive as a civilization, that we're only using, being sustainable. We just need to we could live, every single human could live at the same standard of living as we had in Switzerland in the 60s. Yeah. And that was a very nice standard of living, public healthcare, education, good jobs, great food and so on. It is very much achievable.
There's not a lot of scarcity in terms of like resources that would fill up the basic needs of people in the world. There's like all the scarcity has been either made up or blown out of proportions. I think the biggest problem is just the actual like skerðing of like the cutting down on power of the upper classes. That's the main issue with it, and that's why it doesn't actually go through unless with actual like.
In many ways, we aren't in a real democracy when people go and vote for something and they think they're going to get this and they get something totally different.
And this is also this has been a growing issue in Norway for the last decades. Is that, of course, there's universal suffrage in Norway and people go and vote. But who wins the election means less and less. So there are so many ways, because the state has less power, because you privatized, you're giving it to markets. You have more and more decisions made in courts by high-paid lawyers and judges instead of by politicians. You have more and more decisions taken by international organizations like the European Union. And for instance, we had a huge left-wing majority in the election in 2021, and we wanted to stop the privatization of the railroads in Norway. And there's, I think, in the Norwegian Storting, I would say, I think there's 101 of 169 who want to reverse the privatization. But it's unfortunately impossible, because the EU refuses us to do that. So it's a case of the Norwegian population not being able to decide who is running the trains in Norway. And this is not a crisis only for the left. This is a crisis for every person who believes in democracy, also for the right. And we have the same thing now. We had this big wave of rich people in Norway moving to Switzerland, because we got a government who is center left wing, and they actually made some tax increases for the rich. And then they started to move to Switzerland because they said we can't live in Norway, it's terrible, and and they moved, and then they sort of managed to sort of bully the government into promising, okay, there won't be any more tax increases because they're just going away with their money. And then you have a big problem. You have a Norwegian democracy who is not able to decide the taxes in our own country because some rich people decide to move. And what do we care if they move? You know, their money is still in Norway. You can't move the oil platforms to Switzerland. You can't move the fish farms to Switzerland or the aluminium smelters. So their companies aren't moving. It's really stupid discussion. But they managed to create this hysteria of sort of, oh my God, all these people are leaving and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So you have, in field after field, this feeling that, yes, everyone wants to do something, but it's unfortunately impossible because of this or that rule, or this or that will happen, or that or that. Mm-hmm. And it's not a difficult question to answer why less and less people vote. If you feel that, okay, I vote for change, and you get no change, then you're less likely to vote the next time. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that the people who don't vote are the people with the lowest incomes, the people who are lowest in the class system. They're the people who stop voting first. Mm-hmm. Well, the rich always vote. So they're probably going to the embassy in Switzerland to vote next time. And the reason, so you get this bad spiral, because then you have less and less people voting, and it's more and more difficult to win the elections, and then less and less engagement, and then, it's sort of... So this is a really scary proposition for the left, of course, but I would say also if you're a right-wing person who really believes in universal suffrage, you should be very concerned about this, because in the end, if 50% or less vote, which is not really that far from the truth in a lot of European countries, okay, what is left of democracy? Mm-hmm. And now we can see a lot of people are turning to authoritarian leaders, a lot of young people saying that they think that a strong ruler can be as well as a democracy in ruling a country. And one of the reasons is obviously that democracy has lost its sort of legitimate way of ruling society, because it's not able to mobilize people. Mm-hmm. And this is sort of a result of this moving of power out from the elections, out from the people and the people's representatives, and over to all these non-elected things, the market, the courts, the international organizations. So it's very scary.
Mm-hmm. I think Yanis Varoufakis, the foreign Greek finance minister, he said, had a TED talk some years back where he said that capitalism and democracy, they're not necessarily going hand in hand. A lot of people probably think that, capitalism, democracy, it's sort of interchangeable, but that's not the reality at all. When you have very powerful interest groups or powerful elites and groups, who enjoy very many privileges and powers that others don't, they will press their advantage forward systematically. And before we went live, we were speaking about the fish hatcheries in Norway, because they have moved here in Iceland, and it seems very similar to here. Norwegians became aware of the negative consequences of the fish hatcheries, and you had a movement against them, right? But it was met with resistance.
Yeah, we've had this for many years, and it's been a big industry in Norway. It employs a lot of people, and there's a lot of money in it. And some people have become filthy rich, and it's totally privatized. This is actually exploiting a natural resource that belongs to everyone, and then some few families get really rich. So for a long time, there's been an idea from a lot of people that they should pay an extra tax because they're a rent-seeking tax, because they're sort of like the oil companies do that, the hydropower companies do that, because you're using natural resources that actually belong to the people for your own profit. So you have to pay an extra tax for that. And this has been sort of all the economists even, and the experts and everything, So then they came with a proposition, the government, and there's a big majority behind it in parliament, and okay, we're going to do this, and it has support from the experts, from the government, from the majority of the people, from the majority of parliament, from the labor unions in the fish farm industries, everything. But then these rich people, they have tens and tens of billions of kroner. So they start this gigantic campaign. It's really enormous, with like PR and lobby firms, with lawyers. They still have a lot of lawsuits going on against the Norwegian state for this. They made a big. They threatened to fire thousands of people. Before you fire someone in Norway, you have to send them you can sort of permittere, it's called. You can. It's not firing, but it's like you're like out of work for the next 16 weeks, and then maybe you will come back, but we don't have work for you, sort of. Yeah. And they sent these warning letters to thousands of people for no apparent reason. They never made more money than they did last year, but only to sort of make this scare situation. And they managed to convince the workers and a lot of these communities along the coast, and they had all these because they've of course invested a lot of money in this community. It's true. It's not like it's so they managed to make this gigantic campaign, and at one point they were like, I was even unsure that they were maybe able to stop or at least delay the whole tax. And it would have been, I don't think the Norwegian sort of democracy would even recover from it, because it's like when you have such a strong parliamentary majority behind something, and then you have these very, very powerful capital interests, and it's obvious for everyone what they're doing to stop this, and they're managing to put so much pressure in. And remember, they don't have the public support. We have polls and everything, so it's not like they have the people on their side, but they're managing to do this gigantic media campaign, and suddenly politicians start to stumble and fail and everything. But it went well in the end. But it just says something about the power that are in these, because I don't know if the right-wing people in Iceland say this as well, but in Norway they often say poverty is a problem, but it's not a problem that people are rich. It's only a problem that people are poor. But it is a problem that people are rich.
Yes.
Well, first of all, it's connected. People are rich because other people are poor, and the other way around. But second of all, it is a problem because to have a lot of money is to have a lot of power, and that power is not democratic. So if you have all that money, then you have the power to sort of influence what is supposed to be a democratic debate. And if you go vote, every person, if you're stupid or smart or highly educated or lowly educated or rich or poor, everyone has the same vote. If you care or not, you still have the same vote. But if you're rich, you have all these other ways. We have think tanks, which they pay for. They pay for political parties. They pay for different media outlets. They pay for these PR firms. And I was shocked when I came into parliament, because I'm from a far left-wing party, like a socialist, almost communist party. Yeah? Still, I get invited to a dinner with different type of capital groups, I think, every week. And I never show up, of course. But it's just, wow. It's this extreme sort of, they have so many people hired to sort of... to meet people and talk to people and sweet talk people and all these things, and it's really scary to see. And their power is very, because of the growing inequalities. This power is also becoming unacceptable because it's too big to function within a democracy.
It's really threatening and trampling democracy.
I think just lobbyism as a concept, it makes no sense to have as a fundamental structure within a political system. I mean, you are actually just inviting agents of very powerful capital groups who have personal, what's it called? They have private interests that do not benefit the population, who have, not just incentive, but actual like permission and oftentimes even like support to influence these decisions that are of extreme importance in many cases. And I think that's just not healthy, and it shouldn't be legal. Like
no, and there's probably some difficulties with saying what is a lobbyist and what is just meeting an organization and whatever. And of course, if a firm has some kind of problem with the regulations, they should be allowed to talk to a politician. But why is this always inviting me on dinner? Why is that sort of? Why is there always this feeling of you can get some free booze, you want to come? Always this sort of, there's always this, these meetings, we have tried to propose, the Red Party, that it should be mandatory for all parliamentarians to write a list about everyone they meet, which are lobbyists. Yeah. But it's been voted down many times. And it's ridiculous because it's going to be obvious that they meet so many lobbyist people. And these PR firms in Norway and the lawyers as well, they even have secret customers. So you don't know who they work for.
Wow.
And then they hire ex-politicians who used to be, even from the Labour Party or whatever. And when they're finished, they go to work for a PR firm for some secret customer, probably in the fish farm industry. And they sell their know-how and their contacts and everything. It's really terrible sort of industry or whatever you can call it.
Yeah. If it isn't stopped, if it continues to grow, this sector of power, power, what the government does, how things are managed, it's going to end up like the United States, where lobbyists write all the major legislation, and even in 2011 the United States Supreme Court accepted the Citizen United proposal, or like they deemed it legal, and the definition now for them, they said, because of the Constitution, where you have freedom of speech, Citizen United said that money is freedom of speech. So they were justifying, private interests being able to donate endless amounts of money to the campaigns of certain politicians. So now they just say, money is freedom of speech, and so they can just donate limitless amounts. And of course, this has a detrimental effect on democracy.
This last election now in Norway, for the first time, had a problem with this organization. They collect money from secret donors, and because you have to, if you're a political party, you get money, you have to send it in, and it's published online. But you can write that you get it from this organization, but they're not. It's not mandatory for them to tell who gives them money. So they got, what is it? It's maybe 150 million Icelandic, 180 million Icelandic krona from different rich people who nobody knows who are, and they were trying to give them to the right-wing parties, but which is to their honor, 3 or 4 right-wing parties said no to the money because they think it's wrong to take money from the secret donors. And it's scary as well because you don't know if it's Putin or whatever in the end. So it's also, I understand sort of the reason for thinking that. And these guys who moved to Switzerland, they still give money to Norwegian political parties.
Still applying pressure, still trying to get things through.
In Norwegian politics. They moved out of the country because they don't want to pay taxes. They want to pay money to the right wing in Norway.
Still want to meddle in the.
It's really crazy.
I think as soon as sight is lost of transparency in regards to what actual interests every party is standing for, I think that's a very dangerous road, and I think that's also to an extent happening here with what's called members of parliament here had to have a list of every asset they have and every company ownership and things along those lines, and the utanumhald, the
Management, do you mean, or
yeah,
hagsmunaskránning?
the management of it and the like watching it is extremely flawed, and there had been like cases of members of parliament not actually listing the amount of assets, and that's what brought us the Panama files. And
we recently had big scandals in Norway, but it's mostly because of the spouses of two politicians doing a lot of stock trading.
We've had very similar stuff here.
And so now, and we're working on, and I think that will get a majority in Parliament, working on stronger rules to report this and everything. But also, it's also I think an important thing to sort of combat this is like having like a term system, how many years you can be in Parliament at the time before you have to go out and do something else. I think that it would be smart to not have so high wages for politicians, because if you have very high wages for politicians and they stop being politicians, what else are they going to do? They have to start working for someone, and probably it's just human, try to keep the same wage, and then who can pay a ex-politician the same wage or more? Only rich people. So you have this, if you're trying to go into this, it's probably a lot of things that's possible to do to sort of combat this problem.
It's definitely a big thing that needs to be considered. Our politicians, especially, the mayor of Kópavik, Kópavur, I mean, which is a small, part of Reykjavik, but she has wages that are similar to the mayor of New York. It's crazy high here, and it's been increasing. And of course, psychology shows us that people are more incentivized to keep what they have, but not as opposed to seeking something new.
Yeah.
So when you give people these privileges or put them above the rest, they will do many things to stay there. Yeah,
and also everyone knows this. I know it myself from, we have like a party tax, so we have to pay, I think it's a third of everything we make to the party or something like that. 40% or whatever.
We have the similar.
Yeah, but it's still not a badly paid job in any way being in Parliament for the Red Party. So, you can feel it by yourself. You get a little more money, you get used to a lot of things. And if you have a lot of money, you get used to a lot of strange things. So when people suddenly have problems with paying the electricity bill, and you have a wage which is 10 times their wage, you won't be able to understand what their problem is. And this is a growing problem in all politics in the Western world, is that the political class is so rich that it doesn't understand the problems of the voters. And then you get this big mistrust problem. So in Norway we have had several sort of shocks where the politicians are shocked by the voters being angry for just a small extra tax. It's just some 1,000 kroner and something like that, but it's a big thing for a poor person. But they have just thought that but everyone can afford that, it's not that expensive. But for the poorest people it's really serious, and this is a problem. It's not like it's because you're a bad person, it's just because it's totally human to think that my own life is a normal life. And if your life is statistically not normal in wages, then you have a problem with your perception of life.
Just something that happens. It's not even their fault that much. It's just the system and privilege blindness, forréttindablinda, like we say.
It's like a systematic issue that's definitely also just like often in debates and just in political conversation overall. I try to not take like an individualistic stance in matters, as in like it's this person who is extremely rich, they are morally corrupt, even though they might be. Like I won't like cross that out of the equation, but that's not the issue. The person isn't the issue. The system is, and it's the way the system was fundamentally built up is often the core of the issue.
Thing.
Yeah, and it's like blaming people individually is not gonna help. It's not gonna change things. It has to be scrutinized from like an analytical point of view, I think.
It's not exactly helpful unless you offer some, systematic changes to be able to change the system. And that's where we come to socialism, because like, at least the way I see socialism in very general terms, is that, we had the French Revolution where the aristocrats and the big landlords lost their super privileges, and the bourgeoisie, the owning class, they got some rights and so on. But then afterwards, most people are just working for the bourgeoisie. They're working for the owning class, and they have no choices. They have to work to make a living. And so socialism became the movement of people trying to fight for their rights. And so I see just socialism as the realization of, or completing the French Revolution, in the sense that we are democratizing politics and we are democratizing the economy.
I agree on that. I think also it's the French Revolution is it's the start of the whole concept of the left, as you know, and I also think that it's about sort of completing this, because the idea of democracy in the vote is extremely important. It's probably the most important win the working class has ever scored, gaining the vote. But if you don't democratize the economy, the vote has to mean anything. The vote is almost more of a promise, because it means that it's supposed to mean that everyone has the same power in a society. Or everyone, at least on election day, has the same power in a society. But this is not the truth, and everyone knows it. And this is also, socialism for me is also, it's about the freedom of being able to make your own choices, not like a theoretical freedom to do whatever I want or whatever, but having enough empowerment in your life, which means that you're safe enough in your life, that you can make a choice, that you can quit your job if you want to, because you're not afraid of never getting a new job again, that you can move if you don't like the landlord, because you know there's possibility for you to find somewhere else to live or whatever. And if you sort of aggregate all this is a system where you have democratic control over the economy, but where you also have this personal autonomy, which capitalism, I think now the last 20 years has shown that it's really ridiculous to talk about capitalism and freedom in the same sentence. There was probably, in the golden age of social democracy, there was probably, I think, a huge amount of freedom for a lot of people in the West, compared to now. For a lot of young people, for a lot of poor people, for a lot of workers, there is no freedom to talk about anymore. You just have to do what you have to do. And then you can say, if you're like a right-winger in some kind of study club at university, you can say, yeah, but you have the freedom. It's nominally there. You're not a slave. But yeah, and that's correct, but it's not really worth anything if you can't use it, if it's not possible to use without having consequences which are so grave that you really don't have a choice. So this sort of socialism as, I think, a project of freedom is very important. And in Norway we have a very strong social democratic tradition, which is very radical also in the social democratic family. So the Norwegian Labour Party was one of the only two parties in Europe which chose the Comintern side in 1923, 21 first, and then they broke in 23. And they stayed very sort of left for a very long time. And it's not like they were perfect or they haven't done they went into NATO and a lot of stuff. But it's still, there's so many traditions in the Norwegian working class that it's possible to build on. So I think socialism, at one time you have to have this. I don't believe in utopia. That's wrong. You can't believe in utopia, but that it's sort of a contradiction in terms. But you need to have some kind of utopia. If you don't have it, you can't. You don't know which direction to move in. So it doesn't have to be like This is a typical stupid right-wing question. Can you describe in detail how a socialist society is going to look? No, and it wouldn't be very smart to do it either, because I'm not planning on being a dictator of a socialist society. So I'm not going to design any society by myself. It's ridiculous. It's like asking, what would you do if you were the most powerful man in the world for a day? And the answer, of course, is I would give away my power to the people. But to have some ideas, some principles about how society should be, and like a dream of a classless society, and to sort of work in that direction, but at the same time to try always to find around you, in the community, in your country's history, in the history of the labor movement, in all these small fights around you all the time, all these small building stones to sort of build this on. And this is also this, there was a big discussion about reform and revolution, or it's still a big discussion, I don't know. And it's really difficult, it's not a difficult discussion, but the problem is that the term revolution is not very clear to people, and a lot of, do you mean like a political revolution in the terms of Bernie Sanders, or do you mean like a Russian revolution, or October revolution? And it's which are two very different things. And one thing, the October Revolution is just a historical incident. Yeah. It's not like a blueprint for anything, and they never, I think, thought that it should be. It's just like in this situation, this and that happens.
There weren't a couple of guys who just decided to do this. It was something, the whole, working class people in Russia rising up.
But this idea of changing some things in society, I think that's true. But I don't think reform and revolution are opposites. And Rosa Luxemburg, she has this article, Reform to Revolution, which I think it's trying to find which reforms that are challenging the system. Because if you can't succeed with the small things, how on earth will people believe that you can succeed with the big things? It's just, if you can't sort of show them any example of anything your party or your labor union or the workers' movement has been able to do or deliver or fix, but you can promise them that you're going to build a society with streets of gold and everything, nobody is going to believe that. So you have to have this basis to work on. But if you forget this sort of goal, then this basis will collapse. And this is what happens to the social democratic parties. They stopped thinking about socialism because they were socialist parties. The parties that are known as social democrats, very few of them actually called themselves social democratic. They called themselves socialist. It's a little bit different from country to country, and it's not really a meaningful divide because if you go way back, social democrat was very radical to be as well. But if you lose this sort of stars to navigate after, then you suddenly would just stop finding sort of stop having a direction to, they say like it's about taking small steps. Yeah, I agree. I think it's often about taking small steps, and every once and again a big leap, but mostly small steps. But you have to sort of take the steps in the same direction, or else you're going to have a problem.
to have the shining star in the sky to point towards.
So I wrote this book about the greatest leader in Norwegian social democracy, Einar Gerhardsen. And my point is that he aimed for in Norway we have an expression, you aim for the stars and you land on the roof. But now the Social Democratic Party in Norway, they are aiming for the roof and they're landing in the trash. Because they're not like, they don't have any big ideas or visions or everything. They just want to sort of administrate things. And what's worse, because they only want to administrate things, they're not longer able to administrate things. So it just collapses because of that. So this is sort of the need for ideology, is that without the ideology, without the goals of the principal goals, you won't be able to do all these small things in your everyday work. So this is sort of for me, this has to be connected. But at the same time, if you only sit in a room and discuss ideological questions and would do anything, you're not going to get anywhere either.
Yeah, so many things I'm thinking of listening to you speak, but with Rosa Luxemburg, revolution and reform, I think it's not revolution or reform, it's revolution and reform, and I think Karl Marx agreed. He said we should do what we can to improve the lot of the working class and the power of the working class towards the bourgeoisie and the owning class, and that's like the understanding we need to have is that we are dealing with this class. These class conflicts and how we resolve them and how we get them to the next level so we have a more beautiful society, and so that's the goal. We should do what we can to improve the lot of people, but also we need a revolution in many sense. We need to change the way we do things ecologically, economically, especially when you think about globally. The global injustices are just immense, and like they say in the international, freedom is merely privilege extended unless it's shared by one and all. And that's the freedom the right talks about, is the freedom of the aristocrats or the freedom of the elites that does come at the expense of the working class and the majority of people. And so what we need to do is to figure out how we share these freedoms. And it's interesting that in the golden age of social democracy, where, like you were saying, people in the West, they had the most freedom. They like to connect that, and the right especially, of course, they say this is capitalism. This is what capitalism brought us. But like you were saying, these social democrats that created this society, that created this freedom for us, they were socialists. It was socialism that balanced capitalism to bring us these freedoms.
And in Norway we had this term, which is still in daily use. It's probably the normal thing to say. If you ask what kind of economy you have in Norway, then you say we have a mixed economy. And it's a really interesting term because it's mixed between market economy and the thing nobody wants to say, a planned economy, which it of course is. Every country has even the United States has a mixed economy. There's always planned sectors in an economy. And the right think tanks, the right ideologists, they hate these words. They're always trying to say, no, Norway is a market economy. It's not a mixed economy, because they want to steal the entire, the Labour Party ruled Norway except the war, from 35 to 65. And in this entire period, you sort of built up the country, and the right is working overtime to sort of try to steal all this away from the workers' movement, from the labor unions, from the Labour Party, and to say that this is actually, Norway is actually a perfect capitalistic society because it's a successful society. But in this period, they were working against everything that has made Norway a successful society today.
Mímir Kristjánsson, thank you so much for coming here, and we send greetings to everybody in Rødt, camaraderie greetings. Take care, and best wishes to you all.
Thanks.